Good morning. You are listening to National Real Estate Auction Radio. I am your host, Doug Dennison, and we are broadcasting from beautiful St. Augustine, Florida, the nation's oldest city at WFOY AM studios. Through the power of the internet, this program is being streamed worldwide on 1240news.com. The show will also be archived on RowAuctions.com, as they are the sponsor of this program. Additionally, this show will be posted on YouTube.com. We're going to be talking about real estate auctions, past auctions, upcoming auctions, different real estate markets across the country. We've got a lot of topics today. We've got a special guest that will be calling in, and pretty exciting kind of industry changer for auctions and real estate involvement. So that will happen shortly. Want to remind you that our mission statement is to provide an educational experience for listeners and a promotional format for auctions across the country. Our sponsor is Row Auctions. They are a national real estate auction firm that started in 1936. They do online auctions, on-site auctions, and ballroom auctions. They have offices in Florida, New Jersey, California, Georgia, and have alliances with auctioneers and real estate brokers across the country. They do government auctions, bank auctions, bankruptcy auctions, and much more. They've got a big auction schedule coming up, so check out their website at www.rowauctions.com, or you can call them at 800-323-8388. That's 800-323-8388. Got some good news yesterday. One of the, actually it was a legislative director from Congressman Denham's office, sent me an email. And the GSA sold a property up in Washington, D.C. area for $19.5 million. It had been abandoned for quite some time. This is a good thing. Would I have liked to have been involved or private sector involved? Of course. But the fact that the GSA and the government realizes that they need to sell these properties, that a property that is abandoned has many, many holding costs, and that it's very difficult to keep that property, the value up, the businesses in the area go down when there's an abandoned property. But let's go to our first caller. Good morning, you're on the air.
Yes, Jerry Anderson calling for Doug.
Hey, Jerry, how are you doing, sir? You're on the air, and want to thank you for calling in on this Friday morning.
Well, thank you. I was listening to the show, and boy, that's the reason I called. You hit it on the nose with that GSA sale. I don't know if I interrupted you or not, but tell us more and tell us where you think that's going, or I want to talk about that today when I'm with you.
Well, good.
We have time.
Well, we're going to have time, and that's wonderful. But first, for our listeners, tell us about your background and what you do and what your firm does.
Certainly. Be happy to, Doug. And again, thank you for taking my call. My name is Jerry Anderson. I am in Florida. I'm in South Florida today. I do operate in the state of Florida, and I've known Doug for a while, and we often have these heated conversations about where the industry is going and where I see it, and that's part of the reason he asked me on today. But my background is such that I have some gray hair, if you will. I've been doing this for a while, Doug, as you know, and as I think about the industry, having started back in the 70s, mostly on the commercial real estate side, certainly, but as I've helped build companies, having been president of some pretty good-sized firms, Coldwell Banker Commercial, an international commercial real estate company. I was president there for 5 years and helped build that. I was president of Sperry Van Ness International, which is a pretty large, one of the top 10 commercial real estate companies in the country. So
Hey, Jerry, and let me interrupt you just a little bit. I'm having a little bit of volume problem. Are you on a cell phone, or are you, just wondered if you can bring up that volume just a little bit if you can.
Sure, I am on a handset.
Okay, cool. All right.
So I have a volume button, but I think that affects the way I hear you versus the way you hear me. So it
sounds better now. Thank you.
Does that sound a little
better?
Yes,
it does.
Maybe the volume increases the amplification going out.
Who knows? But it's sounding better. I interrupted you. Go ahead.
No, I'm trying to give you the Reader's Digest version because none of your listeners really want to hear about some guy that's been around the business 35 years. But I am proud to have built a number of national firms in Sperry Van Ness and Coldwell Banker Commercial. And part of the employment agreement with my 5-year stint at Sperry Van Ness International, which is based in Irvine, California, is that I would end up with the master license, or as we call it, the master franchise for Sperry Van Ness for the state of Florida.
Okay.
So for the last 5 years, Doug, that's what I have been doing. We have offices throughout the state of Florida, all commercial real estate offices. I have about 100 agents running around the state. And so I'm very involved in that, and then I've been very involved with Sperry Van Ness on the national front in the distressed asset arena.
Mm-hmm.
I had, and that's the reason you caught my attention with your GSA comment. We'll talk about distressed assets later today. But I headed the national team for Sperry Van Ness International for our asset recovery team. I have about 80 people that participate working with banks, institutions, and of course we utilize auction as a disposition. So I'm pretty involved in the auction arena as well. So I appreciate
Tell me more about Sperry Van Ness. Is it in a lot of states? How many agents throughout the country? And give us a small summary of why maybe Sperry Van Ness is different than a quote unquote normal commercial brokerage.
Well, we consider ourselves normal.
I was going to say better than normal. Well, come on.
No. Look, every firm has their different. We're Sperry Van Ness is one of the top 10 commercial real estate companies in the country, year in, year out.
Okay.
Started in 1987 in Irvine, California, and we have 150 offices around the country.
Wow.
With about 800 agents around the country, and we're in 34 states. We're not in every state, but we're in 34 states.
Mm-hmm.
And the sweet spot for Sperry Van Ness agents is really commercial properties from about $500,000 all the way up to $10 million. I say sweet spot. We like to brag about our big sales, the $50 million run.
Yep.
We even had one for $100 million.
Wow.
We like to brag about those. Truth of the matter is the sweet spot is between $500,000 and $10 million. That's where most of the activity takes place.
Mm-hmm.
All commercial. A lot of CCIMs, a lot of SIORs. We have a very strong auction team, which is we're changing that a little bit based on the demands of the market, which I hope we get a chance to talk about today. But the company's not as old as your sponsor. Your sponsor started in 1936, and Sperry Van Ness only in 1987. So.
Well, Ryle Auctions has been around for a long time, and of course is very well respected in the auction industry. But Auction Point 2013, this is something new, and I was able to come down to the Sperry Van Ness Miami Beach real estate conference a few weeks ago, and actually interviewed you and the president of the company, and heard about this Auction Point commercial auction. And so tell us all about that, if you would, because it sounds like it could be an industry changer.
Well, I think it is. One of the benefits of being older in this business is I have seen changes, and I'm going to reminisce just a little bit to sort of anchor, if you don't mind, my answer to your question. In the late 70s, I owned a company. I'm from Ohio, originally from the Midwest. I owned a company that had started in 1906. I was a young whippersnapper, and I managed to weasel my way into ownership of this company. part ownership. This company was started in 1906, but in the late 70s, I saw something happening in the industry. I saw national firms. One of them was called Century 21. Another one was called Remax. Another one was called Coldwell Banker. And I came back from a trip to California, and I told my partner, I said, this industry's changing. He said, the industry's not changing. I said, no. There's this company out of California, and they're franchising. They're taking local companies and giving them tools and resources far beyond their local ability and connecting the dots all over the country. And I think the residential business and our small commercial division at that company is going to change. And he said, I don't see it, Jerry. He said, I don't see it. Put your head down, keep working. The industry is never going to go national. It's never going to be anything more than just small local operators operating their independent businesses. I argued with him. I debated it. I took him on a trip to California, and he saw what I saw, Doug. He saw the industry changing, and we affiliated our company there in Ohio with Coldwell Banker. And that company went on to be extremely successful, and in fact enabled me to hit the cash-out button in the mid-'80s and move to Florida and actually start, my heavy-duty commercial career in a much more vibrant market. The industry changes slowly, and a lot of people don't see it. Auction Point 2013 is an event that I believe is a game changer. And the auction industry, and you know how I feel about this because we've had some of these debates, the auction industry is really changing. And I know a lot of your listeners are going to tune me out when I say this because they don't want to hear what I'm about to say, but it's changing, and it's changing maybe faster than people realize. The industry changer was really this behemoth company called Auction.com. And the Auction Point group that we were invited at Sperry Van Ness to participate with, and along with other brokerage companies. Marcus & Millichap is involved, Cushman & Wakefield is involved, NAI agents are involved. And we were invited to participate in this Auction Point 2013 event. And it's an online commercial real estate auction. And it's changing the industry as much as Auction.com did. And when I talk about industry, I'm talking about the auction industry. And
right.
That all of a sudden, if you look at the industry, and I think this is what's going to happen very, very quickly, you're either going to be very, very large or you're going to be very, very small. And there's not going to be anything in between. I like to read, and there's a parable out there. Maybe you've read it. Maybe many of our listeners today have read it. And it's called "Who Moved My Cheese?"
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you happen to read that book by Spencer Johnson or not, but
very well known. Yep.
Yeah. The essence of the story is that if you can read the writing on the wall, you're going to do very well in changing times. But if you don't accept the change, or if you fear the change, you're going to be run over. And what I see happening with an event like Auction Point 2013 is the auction arena is changing. Let me give you some stats. This is going to blow you away.
Okay.
The Auction Point 2013, it's auctionpoint.com, by the way.
Okay.
Auctionpoint.com. Your listeners can go there.
Okay.
They're a partner of LoopNet. LoopNet's one of the is the largest commercial real estate database in the universe.
Yes.
So, being a partner of LoopNet, naturally, they have quite the outlet. In just a few weeks, there have been over 300 commercial real estate assets submitted for this auction. That estimated value is over $700 million.
Wow.
A number of institutions are in there. The one institution today is signing the licensing agreement to put their assets in the event. They have 37 assets on that list. There's real estate investment trusts. There's banks. There's institutions. There's quite a few assets. There's about 15 assets over the $10 million mark. If you'd have told me 5 years ago people would buy a $10 million piece of property online,
mm-hmm.
I'd say you were out in the forest too long. I mean, doesn't that just now? Am I on the outside on that, Doug? I mean, what is your? Could you ever have imagined that that sellers would sell and buyers would buy properties that large online?
You know, I did not believe that would be the case, but a good friend of mine changed my mind, and his name is Howard Kelsey. He was formerly from Grubb and Ellis in Phoenix, and then was picked up by the RTC many years ago. I did a couple of auctions with him, and then he became the director of real estate for the Navy. And he became involved in basically shutting down military bases throughout the country, and this is probably eight years ago. And so all of these military bases, a lot of them, which again I'm not real excited about, but a lot of them were given away. They were given away to the local municipality, and that was just at the time the thing to do. Some went to charities that could possibly afford them. Again, this was the thing to do. However, a couple of them, he decided, and his group decided to sell, and sell by auction. And these were big places in California. San Diego was one of them. I can't remember the other one. But big military bases, and he did it online. And you know, I was shocked, and I was saying, "Geez, I should have given me a try," and we could have had it right then and there. We could have had it on the military base, and it could have all the hoopla. And he decided to have it as a online auction, and the thing, one of them brought like $750 million, the other one brought like $400 million, and that's when it changed for me. That was big news back then. I thought it was kind of a an exception to the rule. But then as people, because it was so new, online was so new back then, how many people used it that way. And now, of course, with internet, everybody using it, it's the first thing anybody wants to do, whether they want residential, commercial, whatever, is they hop online and kind of get a feel. And people have drifted away from, maybe I don't have to go to a ballroom auction to buy the property. Maybe I can sit at home and bid, because now I have the trust level that maybe I didn't 4 or 5 years ago in the internet. And is it going to be safe, and is my money going to be okay, and all this kind of stuff. So it really started back then, 8 to 10 years ago, for me anyway, when this big deal military bases got sold online, and that was the start for me, Jerry.
Yeah, and so the cheese got moved, but you're one of those guys that say, okay, so the cheese is moving, I'm going to adapt, and hopefully there aren't people on the line just dig their heels and say, well, this is never going to happen. Because I can tell you at the auctionpoint.com, many of the assets, in fact, over half of the assets are in the $2 to $5 million range. That's clearly the sweet spot for our upcoming event. And
right.
That event stops gathering product for the event March 15th. And what's really unique about it is it's a completely collaborative event with the entire commercial real estate industry, and that is it's just unheard of. So,
what does that mean?
Okay, what does that mean? That's a good question. Auctionpoint.com holding a collaborative event. they ask a group of folks to be on the event committee. I was very honored to be asked to be the chairman of that event committee.
Okay.
On that event committee, we have advisors, agents from Cushman Wakefield, from NAI. We have a strategic partner in First American Title. We have economist, Dr. Sam Shandon. Many of you probably see him on Fox News often.
Mm-hmm.
We have an agent from Grubb & Ellis. We have an agent from Cushman & Wakefield. We have an agent from Delaberto Auction and Realty up in Chicago. All of those folks are working together on this event. And then we also we have over 125 commercial real estate agencies represented for those 300-plus properties.
Wow.
That's what I mean by collaboration.
Wow.
I know. Marcus and Millichap, who many of your listeners may know, sit on the event committee, contributing assets into the event. And if all the companies that I've mentioned, probably, they're one of the larger ones along with Cushman and Wakefield.
Sure.
And historically they've not had to be all that collaborative. But it's a new day, and I give those agents credit for realizing how the industry has changed and how they want to be part of this massive event with a huge advertising budget. We were calling on a bank the other day, and the bank was saying, "Well, I have a very good relationship with a local auction company,
mm-hmm.
and they've told me that if we will simply write them a $10,000 check, they think they can advertise the way you guys are talking about." And we said, well, in all due respect, we have an advertising budget of $350,000, and they're going to spend 10 and drive the same, and they think they're going to drive the same number of buyers to your asset. So the bank said, well, how much do we have to contribute to this auction point event? And here comes the cheese moving, Doug.
Mm-hmm.
Because the answer to that is, to the bank, to the client, you don't have to contribute any marketing money. And the bank said, are you telling me are you telling me I'm comparing free to the local auction proposal? And the answer was, yes, sir, you are. So that's moving of the cheese.
That's a game changer.
That's a game changer. Yes, it is. Because historically, and I've watched from afar. Many of your listeners may know the Kiko company. I have a lot of respect for the Kikos up in Canton, Ohio, which is my hometown.
Mm-hmm.
That company started in 1945. I actually knew Russ Kiko, and of course my generation would have been Dick Kiko, and then of course Lori also. And of course they have it's a family-run business. But I've watched them as a large company in northeastern Ohio evolve. I've watched them go into automobile auctions, and their setup looks like Barrett Jackson. I've watched them go into antiques. I've watched
Jerry,
them in real estate.
Jerry,
yes,
can I cut you off just a little bit? We're going to have to go to a break, and I'm hoping that you can hold on through the couple minutes of ads and then continue our conversation. Is that possible?
Yes, sir, I will. I'll see you after the break.
Perfect. Again, this is National Real Estate Auction Radio. I'm your host, Doug Dennison. We have Jerry Anderson from Sperry Van Ness on the line. We are going to go to a break, and then Jerry will be right back with us. All right, we are back. You're listening to National Real Estate Auction Radio. I am your host, Doug Dennison. We are broadcasting live from beautiful St. Augustine, Florida. We have Jerry Anderson, who is with Sperry Van Ness. Jerry, are you still on?
I am still with you, Doug.
Perfect. You were talking about the fact that this new auction and this new concept is coming up, and basically the auction sponsors and you and Auction Point are taking the cost of the marketing, and you're going to do that, and so a seller wouldn't have to do that. Is that correct?
That is correct, and that it's the two largest players in the online arena right now on the commercial real estate side appear to be auction.com and auctionpoint.com. Auction Point is the event that is the collaborative event with the brokerage community. They're the ones. Auction Point is a LoopNet partner, and both of those entities, both of them pay all of the marketing costs for the sellers. The sellers are not required to put any marketing money into the event.
Wow, that is big and a game changer.
So the rumor on the street, and I guess I'm one. I'd like to watch how people and companies position themselves. So I guess I'll go public with the fact and say, in my opinion, auction.com is positioning themselves to go public. I just think it's extremely evident of what they're doing. Of course, auctionpoint.com, as I just mentioned, already owned by LoopNet, partially owned by LoopNet.
Mm-hmm.
So you have these two monsters, and you've got the one that's going public, and we all know what happened to the small and mid-sized builders when the home building industry started to go public. You don't have to look any further than Lennar and
right.
AB Homes and all the others.
Right.
And for home builders, again, the cheese, in my opinion, as an observer of the industry, the cheese that was moved was home builders either have to be very, very large or they have to be very, very small. There is no middle ground anymore.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I think we're seeing that now in the auction arena as well, where you've got these large national online players doing things differently than the rest of the world. So that doesn't mean a small operation as an auction company cannot exist. I'm certainly not saying that. But I am saying that you better be careful. You're either very large or very small, because I think the tweeners, as I like to call them, are going to get squeezed. And there are certainly, I think, in the auction arena that I operate in, with what I see happening at Auction Point and what I see happening within Sperry Van Ness.
Right.
I think there's some networks out there. I'm probably going to leave somebody off the list, so I'll upset somebody. But I mean, if you look at what Transon does, or what MarkNet does, or what United Country does, or what our SVN Auction Services is now doing, where we're expanding and bringing more auction companies in, and actually assigning those local auction companies. We just brought a company in Richmond, Virginia, and we are assigning them Sperry Van Ness offices to work with and collaborate with Sperry Van Ness advisors in their region for business. So, I mean, that's another way to get out of what I call tweener land. You can certainly be part of a MarkNet or Transon or United Country or SVN Auction Services, or maybe there's another one that I'm not aware. Who am I missing in that list?
I think you've there's many of them, so we'll miss somebody anyway. But I think you got many of them. I guess the exciting thing and the different thing, and I wanted to give you kudos for Sperry Van Ness when we first started, is that Sperry Van Ness has always had the foresight to say, we're not going to get a listing and then just concentrate on all of our people, and hopefully we sell it in-house and then double dip and this would be perfect. You go immediately out to the world and invite broker cooperation, and you do it quickly, and I think that is that's a game changer in my opinion as far as commercial, because that's just not done that often. So that's number one. Number two is the fact that this particular auction, instead of usually what's happening is commercial brokerage or residential real estate. It's basically dog eat dog. You're trying to get a listing, and then when you get the listing, you're going to work with other people. But in this auction, you've invited everybody to play, and it's a very nice sandbox, a sandbox where you're basically going to be paying for the marketing. I mean, that's a win-win situation for Sperry Van Ness agents, Grubb & Ellis agents, Cushman & Wakefield, everybody, in my opinion.
Yeah, well, you can't do that unless you have sponsors, though.
Yes. I agree.
But yes, and not only just the collaboration of those individual agents, but also we have a number of auction companies that have been hired by sellers to sell their property, and they said to their seller, I think this asset should be in this large auction, and I'm the listing agent, so I get paid. So let's really do what's right for you, and put it in this massive event.
Well, let's talk about that. Let's say I've got a property, and I'm a regular real estate broker out there. I've got it listed. I might have seen an email, or I might have checked, a PR web and saw some news about the auction. How much would, if I was a real estate broker, had a hotel for $10 million listed, how much would I have to give up from my commission to play in this game?
You don't have to give up any of it.
Now, see, that's a game changer.
Yeah, the commission stays solely in your possession. Now, you're going to have to do a little work, because what's going to happen is every time a buyer registers to look at your hotel, you're going to get an email that says, hey, Mr. Pete Peterson just registered and looked at your asset. Here's his phone number. Here's his email. Please contact him.
But that's what we're in business for.
Exactly, and that's why you keep the commission.
Okay.
So now the auction point in our event, and everybody charges a little bit different buyer's premium, so we can't sit around here and talk about how much somebody should charge as a buyer's premium. But auction point gets paid by the buyer premium side.
Okay, and how much is that?
In this event, the buyer's premium is 2.5%, 2.5%.
Wow, because that's
one of the lowest in the industry.
Yes, absolutely.
But again, the volume enables them to do that.
Well, it sounds like a win-win situation. How can people get involved in this auction? If you're a auction firm, or if you're a real estate broker, or if you're a seller, how do people find out about this information?
It's very simple. Go to Auction Point, all one word, Auction Point, there's no E on the end, auctionpoint.com, and you'll see a submission button. You can submit a property. It's going to ask you if you're a broker or an owner, and you just put your information right in there, and it goes directly to the approval committee, and you get a chance to interact with them, and they're going to ask you a few questions and see if you can't get your asset in the event.
Well, that is I think a change for the industry. I think it's something that is needed. I like the collaborative effort that you're putting on. I think that's basically the newest thing, because normally it would be, maybe just one broker putting assets into a commercial real estate firm, but very rarely, if ever, having multiple real estate commercial firms putting in properties. I think that's it's a good thing, and I applaud you for it, sir.
Well, we're having some fun. It's I've learned some things. Again, I have gray hair. I've been doing this a long time, the real estate side. But when I watch the analytics that come out, and I can see that this, on these online folks, they can say this particular buyer spent 7 minutes looking at this particular asset. They looked at this asset for 3 minutes. They looked in this folder. They looked at that file. The information that you can get online that we could not get in the ballroom setting,
right?
It baffles me, Doug. I mean, it just blows me away that, and you know what? My cheese has been moved, because I'm having to adapt, and I'm looking at this, and I'm saying, this is exciting. It's not threatening. So it's going to be interesting. I'm going to be at the National Auctioneers Association event this summer, because for our SVN auction services, we're going to be looking for a number of companies to work with us around the country, and I'm really interested to see whether I find people that are threatened by the cheese that's being moved, or excited by it.
Well, I think there's room for both, and I do see that this is a great opportunity, and again, I applaud you for it. You and I were talking a little earlier about the GSA sale, and I put that on the air as kind of like a yay type of thing right in the beginning of the show. I have been pounding, the fact that there's 14,000 government surplus properties that the government owns and that are abandoned and have been not being sold, and they sit in our neighborhoods and our business communities and hurt the value of the area. It could be a problem with crime and vagrancy. But the real thing is, according to the GAO, the Government Accounting Office, these 14,000 properties are costing the American taxpayer $1 billion a year. And these things need to be sold, and I have been a strong advocate. I've been up to Washington, D.C. several times in the last few years, maybe not more than almost 10, it seems like anyway, to meet with congressional leaders and the GAO and the GSA and the CBO, the Congressional Budget Office, because I would like to get this changed. And I got a kind of a yay moment yesterday when I did get an email from Congressman Denham's office saying that one of the properties that they held a congressional hearing on to show the media and the public that these are the properties that are sitting there that are costing the American taxpayer so much money. It just got sold in the last week or so for $19.5 million. So if it cost, who knows, $1 million a year or $500,000 a year or whatever it cost to keep that property in decent shape and security and all those kind of things, now that's off the books. We don't have to pay that as an American taxpayer. But then $19.5 million coming into the coffers, and last I heard, we had a budget problem up in Washington, D.C. So you're very up on this. Tell me your thoughts about the fact that these government surplus properties should be sold, and how to do it, and how to get the private sector involved.
Well, I think that you standing on the soapbox is well respected, and I commend you for that. Yes, I mean, we're picking up pennies. We're closing the White House tours, where meanwhile we've got 14,000 properties sucking the budget dry, because you don't have to look any further than your own neighborhood to see what happens when a property is abandoned. And that's what's happening, Doug. These properties you're talking about, they're not being maintained. They're bringing down the value of everything around it. Imagine trying to run a business next door or close by to one of these 14,000 properties that you're talking about.
Yep.
So, again, drive around your neighborhood, you can see what we're talking about. It's that house that's not being kept. It's owned probably by a bank. Somebody that's they're not paying attention to it. It's an asset. It's on the books. They know they're going to lose value eventually, but they don't take any action. And that's what's going on with these 14,000. So I know that you were involved last summer on trying to stir the pot and rattle the saber, if you will, say, come on, help. But just the vandalism that takes place. This is not a government-owned property, so I'm not going to throw stones, direct. But let me share with you a story about a bank property that we had been hired to handle.
Okay.
It was an old hotel, and the bank had not been paying any attention to it. They had put a fence around the building, but of course, people broke through the fence. There were vagrants living in it. It had become a drug-dealing mecca.
Yep.
There was a young gal that had been raped in this facility.
Okay.
So, I mean, the crime was awful. And, of course, the bank was out of state. The bank didn't even know any of this was going on, other than they'd get an email from the person that was supposed to be tending to the property, and then they'd see the police report.
Right.
That's what happens when a property is just left to disintegrate. And you're right. I mean, there are a lot of buyers. If we could get those, I don't care whether the disposition method is by auction, I don't care if they hire a local realtor. I don't care if they just, put a consultant on the assignment, but make something happen. Stop the bleeding, stop the vagrancy, stop the crime, and get those assets on the books of somebody that can do something good with it.
Well, these assets are not residential. These are office buildings, and they're warehouses and courthouses. This particular property that just sold was a heating plant up in Washington D.C. area. But to give you numbers, I'm reading here an article that one property already drawing attention is the old post office annex in Washington D.C. The facility loses $6 million a year, yet it hasn't been used in 10 years. Denham says Donald Trump in the Waldorf Astoria has expressed interest in buying the annex to use as a commercial venue, yet creates jobs and actually makes money. And I believe that there is movement that Donald Trump will work on that property. But that's $6 million a year in holding costs, and it hasn't been used for 10 years. That's $60 million. That's why you can come up with $1 billion worth of cost, according to the GAO. But let's take it one step further. What happens when the property is sold, Jerry? What happens when now you take it out of the hand of the government, but now it goes into the private sector? What are some of the benefits in your eyes as far as something that will happen on the positive?
Well, you mentioned warehouses, you mentioned office buildings, and by the way, vagrants can live in those too, so it's not just residential.
Yep.
But once those assets get converted over to the private sector, now, an investor has an investment, or possibly somebody that's going to use their building for their own purpose. So what do we desperately need in this country? We've talked about it for a long time. It's a four-letter word. It's jobs.
Right.
So, one of the good things that happens is that if that office building, that post office you're talking about, or that office building, or that warehouse, if that gets into the private sector and a business goes in there, business needs employees. That means jobs. That means tax dollars. That means payroll taxes. That means Social Security monies get paid to, self-employment taxes and so forth get paid to D.C. And not only just, taxes at that level, but what about the real estate taxes? So now the real estate taxes, property gets reassessed. You've got a business in there generating revenue. They can afford to pay the real estate taxes that trickle then to the municipalities. And I read a number one time that said that every dollar that goes into a community or a municipality gets multiplied 7 times. Have you ever seen any stats on that, Doug?
I have not seen that, but I vaguely remember something like that.
So, what does that mean? Well, you got taxes, you've got jobs, and I don't know what the ratio is, if it's $1 that turns to 7, but it's disposable income that gets spent, whether it's spent on fast food, it's spent on goods and services. It's spent by people in that community instead of people that may have previously been on the unemployment roster. So, to me, only good things happen. Forget about the fact that the neighborhood value goes up.
Exactly.
Now you've got that eyesore going, but getting the money flowing. So I'm with you. I'm not taking the proactive stance that you have, but it is frustrating.
Well, I thank you for your support, and again, very very appreciative of that. Tell us how people can get a hold of you, Jerry, because you are the point guy for this auctionpoint.com auction, and it's pretty exciting, and I know a deadline is coming up. So how can people contact you and get their property in?
It's very easy. Go to the auctionpoint.com website, and you can submit your property there. And my direct email is very easy. It's my name with a dot in the middle, so it's jerry.anderson, Jerry.Anderson at SVN. S is in Sierra, V is in Victor, N is in November.com.
Well, Jerry, thank you so much for calling in on this Friday. Very interesting back and forth in regards to what's going to happen with the auction industry. I do want to applaud your efforts on this particular sale. I think it's good for the business, good for the industry, and again, thank you so much for calling in.
Thank you, Doug. Have a good day.
You bet. Take care now. Okay, that was Jerry Anderson from Sperry Van Ness. Big auction coming up, and we have another caller. Good morning. You're on the air.
Good morning, Doug.
Allison from Rowell Auctions. Well, how are you doing?
I'm doing well.
Well, good. Tell us about upcoming auctions, if you would, for Rowell Auctions.
Sure, and we have quite a bit coming up.
Okay.
Wednesday, March the 13th, we have a commercial complex in Louisiana.
Wow.
March 18th, 19th, and 20th, it's a 3-day. It is a whole bunch of residentials, commercials, and lots that are up for auction, and some of them, not all, but some of them are absolute. It will specify.
Okay, and where is that going to be?
That is going to be, we have Georgia, Alabama, South Carolina, and Florida.
Wow, okay.
And that's all be able to view online.
Okay, nice.
And then we also have, on March the 22nd, it's a museum and some of the personal property that was inside, including the real estate.
Okay. And where is that going to be?
That is going to be online also.
Okay.
We also have 13 assets in Carabel, Florida.
Nice.
That will be also online.
Okay.
And that's pretty much rounding up towards the end of the month.
Wow. Lots of stuff. How do people find out about these properties, Allison?
RowellAuctions.com.
Okay, RowellAuctions.com. Does that have any information about the property, like, square foot and how many rooms and
it will.
Okay.
It'll actually have photos. It'll have the description, and if we have a local realtor in the area that's working with us, it'll have their contact information.
Okay.
That way, people that are viewing the assets can see the photos, the description of the photos, and be able to contact somebody to look at the property.
And you mentioned absolute. Now, what does that mean for our general public?
It basically means that there's no minimum, no reserves. It will go to contract regardless of price.
Okay, so regardless of price, it's going to be sold. No minimums, no reserves. That's
no second chances.
No second chances. So that's why there's so many people that will be interested in these. If they didn't write down the RowellAuctions.com place, or if they would rather call you, is there a number where they can call to find out more information?
It is 800-323-8388, and I would be happy to help anybody.
Wow, very good. Do that again if you would.
800-323-8388.
Very nice. Allison, thank you so much for calling in with the Rowell report. Sounds like a whole bunch of auctions. The website again is what?
RowellAuctions.com. RowellAuctions.
Very good. And Allison, you are the executive producer of this show. You do a fine job. I want to thank you on the air for your fine work, and you have a wonderful weekend.
You too.
All right.
Bye.
Bye-bye now. Okay. We had Jerry Anderson, Sperry Van Ness, which was talking about this upcoming auction for commercial property. You want to go to auctionpoint.com to find out about it. We also had a nice discussion about the government surplus properties, the value of selling these properties. I want to say kudos to the GSA for selling that $19.5 million property just recently. I'm hoping that Congress will give them more authority to sell some more of these properties, because we need to do that. I'm also hoping that the GSA and the government will ask the private sector to get more involved in these sales on a listing side for a real estate broker or an auction firm. I do not believe that we need to hire more government employees at this time. We need to go out to the private sector and help those businesses. I feel very strongly about that. But again, kudos for the GSA for selling $19.5 million heating plant up in the Washington, D.C. area. That takes away all the holding costs. It is going to help the area with the new private sector buyer. So, again, great job. And then Allison Marchetti calling in with the RAL report. Looks like a whole bunch of auctions that are coming in Florida, Louisiana, South Carolina, Georgia, and a couple other states, I think. So pretty exciting, and that's RALauctions.com. I want to thank everybody for listening in. It's a great day in St. Augustine. I hope you all enjoy the weekend with your families. Take care.